Welcome to episode 8 of the New England Holstein Association podcast series. Today's podcast episode was made possible by Guardian Genetics. Guardian Genetics at Fairview Farms, LLC is a premier recipient and genetics program located in Woodstock, Connecticut. Guardian offers year-round weekly transfers and have worked with 7 dairy and 5 beef breeds. With 7 years experience and over 7,000 embryos transferred, please consider Guardian Genetics for your recipient needs. Guardian Genetics is also home to high genomic and crossover genetics, with heifers and bulls headed to AI and flush programs across the country. The current inventory includes 10 heifers over 3,200 TPI, 25 heifers over 3,150 TPI, and 20 heifers with more than 200 pounds combined fat and protein. For more information, please contact Wesley Smith at 814-937-8594. Thanks for joining us today. The mission statement of the New England Holstein Association indicates it's a member organization dedicated to encouraging the breeding and raising of registered Holsteins, and this podcast intends to provide resources towards those ends while increasing member connectedness. I'm your host, Betsy Bullard of Breguin Farms, Turner, Maine, and I currently also serve as the Area 1 Director for Holstein USA. Each of our podcasts will feature one or more members and friends discussing timely topics from breeder perspectives, marketing activities, on-farm technologies and management strategies, to youth highlights and numerous things in between. Guests will have homework for each episode, naming an iconic New England cow and a personal cow icon whose story intertwines with their Holstein experience. Initially suggested as a 2024 year in review, our discussion expanded to how various events are covered today. For example, online coverage versus print, and the immediacy of those options and the effects on those participating in the events, covering them, and communicating around them. Our guests today are Tim Abbott of Borderview Genetics and Showbox Sires, and Kathleen O'Keefe of Cosmopolitan. Well, welcome to our guests today, and we'll start off with Tim Abbott of Borderview Genetics, right here in Vermont, Showbox Sires, and untold other enterprises. And Tim, if you'd tell us a little bit about your New England roots.
Great, thanks, Betsy. And I guess this is truly a case of age before beauty, because Kathleen is going to go after me for her introduction. So thanks for having me on today, Betsy. Certainly, the New England Breeders and New England Holstein Association is near and dear to my heart. Sharon and I both grew up going to New England Holstein functions and watching the legends of our business from New England. And I always go back to Ed Gould and how much he meant to us, and the Gary Darlings and the Bob Fitzsimmons and the guys like that from New England that have done so much. Certainly your dad, Steve Briggs, anytime you get to talk to him, you learn a wealth of information. And so it brings me pride to talk to the New England breeders about some of our experiences and what we're doing. What we're doing today, Borderview Genetics has a big stable of cattle, but not housed in New England anymore. We don't have our operation going. We are boarding all our cattle at several great establishments around the country, but Borderview still doing a lot with embryo production and cattle. I would say we're making about 100 females a year and selling 400 or 500 embryos around the world a year through the Borderview brand. Along with that, we have the Dairy Sales Alliance, our partnership with Chris and Jen Hill, that we manage a half dozen top Holstein and colored breed sales around the country a year. And then the new adventure that is taking a lot of our time is Showbox Sires, a new sire company that we're working with to develop high-type bulls. That's great to be on the podcast, lots of different avenues, but basically all revert back to one thing, and that's the great mentorship and leadership we got in New England, both Sharon and I, with the Holstein and Jersey cow.
Hey there, after you've finished enjoying this podcast, might I recommend you join me, Tim Hammerich, and our guests on Clarity at Work from Zoetis. We'll be talking genetics and their place on the dairy. You've got a seat at the table as we discuss innovations, what's next for the industry, and more.
I have to find the value in everything that I do, and I still find value in Clarified Plus, so we're going to continue to use it.
Just search for Clarity at Work wherever you listen to podcasts. Once you finish with this podcast, of course.
Definitely your Border View and Dairy Sales Alliance and Showbox all had involvement in lots of New England events when we look back over 2024, and I'm sure those will weave their way into our conversation. Thanks for joining us today, and Kathleen's certainly a face that we see at lots of New England events with cosmopolitan coverage, and always good to have you involved in our events. And if you'd tell folks a little bit about yourself and your role.
Well, thanks, Betsy. Really appreciate the invitation. It'll sound like I'm blowing sunshine at you guys, but New England is one of my favorite places to go whenever that comes up on the schedule for Cosmo. I'm usually the one that wants to grab it. I know Julie enjoys it too, but I feel like there's places in this world that are home, and there's places that feel like a second home. And for some reason, for this Wisconsin girl, New England is one of those places I just love. A little about me and my background. I grew up on a 40 cow registered Holstein herd in northern Wisconsin. Holsteins are my native breed and still number one in my heart. I enjoyed my time growing up on the farm, but I went off to university at Northwestern University right outside of Chicago. And I didn't, when I left, necessarily think I'd go back to the farm, but it took a couple of years there, had a great education. I loved it, but you could hear northern Wisconsin calling me home. Went back and farmed with my parents for about 10 years until they retired. And then I took on some different things. If it's been done in the Holstein business, I've probably done it. I've worked for sale manager, have made sale catalogs for going on 30 years now, I think. I was the northern Wisconsin field rep for Holstein USA. And then eventually really found the place that I loved was in 2007, your friend and mine and ours, Karen Knutson, and our friend Joel Hastings hired me to work at the Holstein World. And I was first hired on to help with their online sales department, which in 2007 was still relatively new, with websites, banner ads, in the days before smartphones, in the days before everyone even had an internet hookup, which seems inconceivable now. I was part of the group that built that, and then moved also into becoming sales and doing a lot of writing for the print part of the magazine as well. I think I spent 8 years with the World, and when they went through some changes, I went and worked for an AI company for a little while, did some marketing help with Butler View for a couple of years. And then in 2019, my partner and great friend Julie Ashton and I had the fantastic opportunity to purchase Cosmopolitan, a print magazine and online presence that the Wright family, Lexi and Ella Wright from up in Alberta, had done just such a fantastic job developing. They wanted to step back. They'd done it for almost 15 years, and we had the chance to buy it and move into that, and we did. I think if someone had said, we bought it in March of 2019, I think if someone had said, oh yeah, in a year we'll have a global pandemic, why not? I don't know if that was really built into the 5-year business plan. Strangely enough, that was an event with a silver lining for us, because I think that really catapulted our online presence. And as events slowly started popping up again in those weird 2020 and 2021 years, it really poured some jet fuel to our online crowd and following. And so from there, we were fortunate when we bought Cosmo to also get the right to purchase the rights to Holstein World and the All-American Contest, which is where I'm talking to you from today. We've just had our committee meetings and finished up, and we look forward to bringing it back to Tim, announcing those nominations in the Open Holstein and Open Jersey contests next Sunday on the December 8th in Nashville, which has been a wonderful affiliation we've had with the Alliance and one of the highlights of the year for us. So that's a long intro, but there you have it.
Kathleen, are you going to give us a little preview of who got nominated? Do you want to tell?
I am not. It's actually, we had most of the committee here. We do have a couple absentee ballots out. There's a couple of people. This was a crazy year to get it scheduled, between sire summaries being a little bit earlier in the month than typical. The show in Cremona, there's always a good crowd that goes over there. And we had a couple of people on our committee that are over there. So it's not quite officially done yet, but we've got everyone that was in person here. And I think I've got 2 or 3 ballots out for the couple committees floating around. And as soon as we get in, Tim, you'll find out on Sunday.
And the reason I asked that, Betsy, of Kathleen, is because we sit up there in front of thousands of people on the internet
Right.
and hundreds of people at
Hundreds
the
in the
event.
room.
And you have to read those things, and it's a little nerve-wracking. And Kathleen
Right.
always picks on me that
It's a
I'm
kids.
gonna have to flow.
Right. I have the advantage. It's spoiled for me. I've had a chance to look over the names and know it. It's a cold read for him on the spot. And every once in a while we get a cow name or a person's name but he does it. He's a
We
good.
get through it. And honestly, the integrity of that, Kathleen, is it's huge and it's important, and that's why it's an awards show.
Excellent. And kudos to both of you for making that quite an event. That definitely, I think is something that
Quite an event.
folks look forward to, and kind of a, like you said, kind of a high point. And, back to Kathleen, your comments. I mean, it's December in New England, sunshine. We can use all the sunshine we can get. So never apologize for that.
Keep blowing it your way. Okay. Good to know. All right.
So when we look back at 2024's kind of events that occurred around New England, we started the year off with some sales, and then we moved right into our All Breed Spring Show that had tremendous participation, and that kind of leads me into our next talking point. And again, maybe we'll start with Tim. Kathleen touched on it in her bio a little bit. The promotion of events, be it sales or be it shows, has changed tremendously over the last, even the last 5 years. How does that affect your Border View, your Dairy Sales Alliance work, in the early days of your Showbox adventure?
Kathleen referenced that, with the changes that she had to make in her business because of the pandemic and the silver lining that came out of that, Betsy. And I think the world got smaller because of it, meaning that we all had to communicate some way. And I, at the time this started, I didn't know what Zoom was. I didn't know what a podcast was. Certainly didn't know what TikTok was. Each of those things, Betsy, and I applaud your New England leadership for taking the initiative to bring information to your members via podcast. Kathleen, you and I talk on podcasts all the time, and we're told over and over and over that it's so nice to pop in a podcast and get information when you're bringing the cows to the show in the truck, or you're on the tractor planting corn, or you're bringing out your morning load of manure to spread, or you're just kicked back in the evenings, watching a football game and you throw a podcast on. Kathleen, I think you and I have both seen the podcast thing explode because of the way people listen. Would you agree with me on that?
I totally would agree with you on that. And I think we'll get into talking about maybe the way we used to market or the aspects of print. And I don't think it's necessarily replaced anything. I think it's yet another place where people gather info from. I do see it a little bit generationally. I think people who are younger will definitely just do something they can listen to on their phone or grab from their phone in a way that maybe I didn't grow up with. And so I think the podcasts are fantastic. I do hear it all the time from people. Either they want to see a video or they want to hear a podcast, something. I hear it. If I'm driving tractor, I can pop in my earphones and just listen to this and catch up on things. And so I do think that COVID year of 2020 was just a black swan event on one hand, and yet it really helped all of us navigate into different platforms and into the future in a way I don't know that we would have done in our own comfortable pace of time. Same. I didn't know what a Zoom call was, Tim. I'm still not the greatest at mastering them. And so it's forced all of us to be connected in a different way maybe than we used to be.
I want to mention also, you say generationally, Kathleen, because I agree. It's one of the toughest things for me to do this is going to shock our listeners, Betsy, but I'm going to be 60. Who would think little Tim Abbott's going to be 60? But
Little Timmy.
It's gonna happen if I'm lucky. It forces you to learn this technology, and once you do, you never go back. I think about how long I fought getting an iPhone because I liked my flip phone.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't no more live on a flip phone today than I could. I can't even imagine it. And it's no different than going to my browser and going to Cowsmo to read a sale or show report, or getting on Cow Buyer to buy a cow. So, guys, I think I would say, yes, generationally, I think it's a heck of a challenge for us to get there, Kathleen, but when you do, you never go back. And I find that fascinating.
I think it has changed the way we do business as Cosmo. It's definitely changed the way you do business as the Alliance. Your Bright Futures sale, for example. I mean, would that exist if COVID hadn't happened? I mean, would that exist on that? I think it forced people to obviously online sales were going on from, I'm thinking back to the world when I started 2007, I would say 2008, in that area, the very first people kind of started dabbling in it. I know Jason Lamoureux in Michigan was an early adapter of it. There were people, like the technology was there before the infrastructure of internet. We'd go to farms and wanted help, and the world got into the online sales business for a while and did some bidding. But so many times you'd go to the farm and you'd be ready, and literally you couldn't get connected. Like the tail wagged the dog on that.
Right.
And as the infrastructure is built through the country and through our rural areas, and then smartphones came along, and the iPhone was a game changer as well. I mean, I think it has a positive way of sharing information, but even almost sometimes like that instant gratification. I remember back in the 2008, 9, 10 era, and we would go and cover shows online, and Karen would say, as long as you have the results up by the end of the weekend. I mean, that was a big step up from waiting for the report in the magazine. And so as long as you had the results up by the end of the weekend, now if we waited till the end of the weekend, like people would have our head on a pike, like it's like people get mad now if you can only get the results up and the pictures are an hour late. They're like, where are the photos? Where are the photos? Like, it has brought about this instant gratification, and there is an instant stream of information. And I mean, I think, and there's no going back. Like, you won't ever put that horse back in the barn with the iPhone or the smartphones, internet capability. And like I said, as the accessibility to it has become, Tim, I'm sure you've driven in northern Vermont in, let's say, 2000, 2001 with a phone at the time. And like me driving in northern Wisconsin as a Holstein field rep, you were probably on drop call time more than you were on actual phone call time in that area. So it's amazing when I think back 20
And
years.
when you're in an area, and I spend enough time in New England now that there's still those areas, and you go crazy because we're in an instant society.
Yes.
So
And we went from like, oh, I dropped the call to like, I can't believe in today's day and age, I'm 10 miles north of Eau Claire and I can't get on the cell phone. Yeah, it's astounding, but yep.
Those are great points around that whole connectedness and sharing of information. And really those are some of the big drivers for the New England Association in embarking on this podcast process to how do we keep doing better at connecting our members to information and connecting our members to each other. And, again, if we look back on the year, we had various events, whether there were sales in Vermont. We had some of those earlier in the spring at Robeth and Goodview, and we moved into some other sales in June here in Maine at Breguin. We had an all-breed spring show that we had lots of people. We had different forms of coverage. Cosmo was at some of the shows and sales, and connected piece and that dissemination of information piece, again, looks a lot different today than it might have. And
right. And so for us, it has changed in time what the world used to do 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, which was a true reporting. Like that news showed up in your mailbox. Like sometimes you hadn't heard a sale report or done that. The world was a monthly. We are a 8-time-a-year magazine. And so we've had to reassess what is timely, what are people interested in, what do people still want to see in print. And we are, I'll admit, like we are a high type, deep pedigree show oriented crowd, and that's our people, and that's what we love. And so that is where our information is. We do heavy coverage on the shows. We don't put as many sale reports in print. So let's just say you had a great sale at your place, Betsy. We were there doing some reporting on it. That may or may not get into print, depending if a magazine's still going to print, and the next cycle, if you've missed that, by the time it comes out, will it be 2 months later, 2.5 months later? People have seen it, people have known it. And so there's a more valuable use for that, for those print pages with some different things. But we do a way better job of reporting from sales, getting that information on the sale page that day from the sale. Afterwards, you load some pictures on, and that becomes your sale report. And honestly, in today's day and age, that information is disseminated quickly. It's just different than it used to be in the past when the sale managers were really well trained to send you a sale report at the end, buyers, sellers, all of it. But it might take a while. So today we get that information as out there as quickly as we can. The sales formats are so different between tag sales, between online sales. You don't necessarily have that clerk at a table in the back the way you did when every sale was an on farm or on location physical sale with live cattle. It's different nowadays. And actually those sales might be almost in the minority. I guess I'd be interested in that.
Betsy, if I can jump in, Kathleen, you lead me to a couple thoughts I don't want to lose. And you're exactly right. It's changed the way you report and the way things go. I really like to look at our sales, what we do at the Alliance, as we're a little bit like a mutual fund. I'm still the ringleader when I'm at a sale. I'm the Barnum and Bailey part of our sales team. And I love to be there with a crowd of 300 people wanting to jump up and down and bid and get to the next cow and seeing the cows in the ring. I've done this 35 years. I still get the biggest charge out of that. But I've also learned, and again, it's evolution. Chris and I do these Bright Futures sales, which you've referenced, and that's where I wanted to go. We literally sit in our living room or on my lanai in Florida, and there's 4 of us here, and we sell $200,000 to $300,000 worth of embryos or choices, and not a person here. And we have, hundreds of people online, and it's a great forum. And we're not paying to truck cattle where they don't need to go. We're not taking inappropriate health risks that I think sometimes we forget about. Send 90 lots to a fairgrounds and wonder why cattle leave sick. The way we've changed this has been just magical, not because we planned it, but we've had some offshoots that have been really good. So, we do some hybrid sales where we, like Nashville, where it's driven mostly online, but it is also a fairly large gathering of people. So I think all the things work, Kathleen, but the one that amazes me the most, when Chris and I sit down and have a Bright Futures sale in our living room, in our shorts and t-shirt, and the dog sitting on our lap, this business has changed.
Fantastic points about how rapidly the business has changed, and have to appreciate both of your enthusiasm for those changes. And even when we look, in our New England coverage of events and our involvement in events, the association now has a pretty active Facebook page as far as recognizing our members' accomplishments and events, and sharing in those coverage pieces that Kathleen you referenced, and some of those sale pieces as well. And it all kind of fits together in this ecosystem that wasn't even a thing maybe 5 years ago. You've both given us lots of things to think about and tremendous breadth of experiences to share with our members and your ongoing activities. And I'm confident that we'll see both of you at lots of things in 2025.
We've talked about the sales a lot. What I also want to touch on is when we come and cover shows. And I want to say, it's no secret that we've lost membership. We've lost it in Wisconsin. You've lost it in New England. I mean, the group of people is smaller. And sometimes you're at a show and you see the people in the stands and you think, oh, the stands used to be just packed. You could hardly get in. And yet here's my sunshine. Again, the interest and enthusiasm in showing purebred dairy cattle is stronger and better than ever. The one thing to remember, and it's hard sometimes when you're showing somewhere, is that your audience is not any longer exclusively those butts in the bleachers. It is the thousands of people that are checking it out online. And I don't care the size of the show. We do some real smaller local regional shows. We do a few even district shows here in Wisconsin. The hundreds to thousands of page views we get for shows of every size, every color, every breed. I just want to say there is still a passion and an enthusiasm and an audience out there. It's spread farther geographically now. We didn't have an instant connection to people from the UK or Japan or Australia tuning in or viewing our pages or photographs or video, whatever we do, the way we do now. Sometimes we don't have our back of the barn sales anymore where you still get 300 or 400 people, but the people that are interested in your genetics are still out there. They're just following you in a different way than they used to.
We sold embryos in Italy out of Footloose. They brought great money, and they're bought by Castle Verde, one of the biggest breeders in Italy. Their message was they watched Footloose on the screen of World Dairy Expo, and they could not believe the cow that they saw. So without this, would they have paid all this money for the embryos? They loved the cow, not because they were in the stands at Madison, but because they were at home watching this. I watch the New England show if I can't get there. I mean, I watch it online, and I've called people for prices on cows that I've seen online. So don't think that because people aren't in the stands and people don't go to shows. I think this is a great gift, because I don't have any interest in being in a hotel room another night, but I do have interest in watching what's going on and learning.
People still love print. They still buy print advertising. There's been studies that show the effectiveness of a good print ad stays with you longer than some of the stuff you do consume online. But I do joke quite often that if we only had a 3% finder's fee or commission on every animal that was sold from a Cosmo photo online from a show, we wouldn't have to sell anything. So it does work.
And that also was a pretty spectacular redirect to a question for how is your homework? How about that iconic New England cow, iconic cow in your experience?
Tim stole mine. I would be, it would be hard for me because this is a cow that also has a Wisconsin connection. So that's kind of why I bring it around. But if I pick one that in my brain popped, and she was the first cow that popped to mind, was Whittier Farms Lead May. And obviously it's a cow family that has just populated over the world, well respected, ton of great daughters, put bulls in AI, branches everywhere. A cow that has some classic New England Manor prefixes, Waregan, Raymau, Juniper, all scattered throughout Whittier Farms, obviously. But that cow came to Wisconsin. Donnie Meyer bought her, and it was the late 90s. I meant to look up when that was exactly, but it was the late 90s. And our farm was 45 minutes from Donnie's. It was a place you stopped in quite regularly. And so when Donnie and Dr. Scott Armbruster brought her to Wisconsin, I think she calved in again and then went 95, just made a ton of good daughters from there. Obviously, her influence extended out to Ohio and Wabash Way, Crockett Acres. The Wabash Way cows went up to Canada. Emily Ann, who I think is a 50-star brood cow up there. Europe, over to Iowa to Morning View. I mean, I think there was just that cow family just kept going and made that really balanced, great type, great production family that obviously is still populating today. So I guess when I first saw my homework assignment, that's the cow that came to mind because I saw her influence there at Donnie's and in Meyer Lane and all the cattle that went out from Donnie when he was marketing a lot of cattle. I guess if you really wanted to get nerdy about it, you should probably pick Winthrop Chenery, and the very first cows that were imported to Massachusetts would probably also have to be on there.
Well, thank you. And that's always a great story too. And another reminder of how connected we all are. And Tim, Kathleen made sure you weren't going to steal hers. So that's,
That's right.
Hey, don't you hate it when somebody gives their homework report and trumps you before you've even got to go? Great. Lead May was not my cow that I had, but you were 100% right, and you did your homework well, Kathleen. So there's a cow from New England that I mentioned that will bring us back to some of our New England roots, not because of her impact on the breed, but because of her impact on me. And it was G. Metcalf Valiant Mist. She was born and raised 5 miles from where I grew up. I grew up on a Jersey farm and had seen high-priced Jersey cows bring upwards of $2,500 in my day. Like that's what I had seen. And I got to be great friends with Ed Gould, who calved Mist in. And I remember many of your listeners could support this, Betsy. I clipped cows when I was in college, just like many college kids did. And when I was home for Christmas that year, I clipped Mist as a fresh 2-year-old and couldn't believe the beauty and the power and then the numbers Ed Gould was saying the cow was worth. And I'd gotten to know Bryce Metcalf, who was co-breeder of the cow. And then the cow went on to Lyle Haven and Jerry Rappaport's influence on the business in New England and Bob Fitzsimmons. But I go back to G. Metcalf Valiant Mist because, guys, she showed me what the value of great cattle was and is. She gave me the passion to say, wouldn't it be fun to sell $1 million cow someday? Wouldn't it be fun to calve in an all-American type 2-year-old? And while Mist probably didn't have the impact on the breed that certainly Lead May or some of the cows that you've mentioned did, for me, the impact of Mist was huge because she turned this country bumpkin into somebody that had a lot of passion for the business. I go back to Ed Gould and Bryce Metcalf and Bob Fitzsimmons and Hubert Langmaid and that crew that were involved with Mist that gave me the passion to go down the roads. A little different twist, but we could go on. Kathleen, you and I could play ping pong with
I know. I love this memory road, but I almost hate how it dates us a little bit here, Tim. I hadn't thought of Valiant Mist in a long time. That's a good one. The marketing value of a cow that is quote unquote hot is amazing.
Speaks to what we've talked about all day, the power of promotion.
That's right.
Think about that cow. Like if she hadn't caught Jerry and Bob's eye and she hadn't got all the publicity and all the wind in her sails. That was all done through promotion
That's right.
and marketing. Granted, she was a great cow with a great pedigree, but
Mhm.
still promotion is what turned Mist from just a cow that was born on a farm in Cabot, Vermont, to an iconic
Right.
value cow
On embryos around the world.
around the
Yep.
world.
Mhm.
Well, A+ for both of you on the homework assignment. Great stories, and again, a reminder both, as Tim said, on the promotion end of it and on the people end of it too. Yeah, it's always fascinating on these stories to hear the people aspects, the people that you came into contact with that were associated with these cows, and the folks that we're still in the mix today, and just think maybe there's some kid that's clipping while they're home on Christmas break that finds one under all that wool here in the Northeast in December that really makes a difference, and we'll have them on here in 5 years or 10 years when somebody else is doing this.
I know there's a kid. I know there's kids coming home in Wisconsin going to do it. And I know, like, I am so enthusiastic about the future of our business. And I know there's kids at home getting hooked the same way we did.
Betsy, I have to steal one more thing from a previous podcast, and this came from Steve Briggs, and it was so profound to me. And I leave our listeners with this today, Betsy. And when I talk about my mentors, I've got all these guys that were 40 years older and 30 years older, and Steve Briggs and Tom Morris and Ernie Kiefner and Jim Ostrom and John Vosters. We all sat around at Expo doing podcasts, and to a T, every one of them said that their mentors are young people. And Kathleen, you just brought it up. I think we forget that sometime in the business. So Betsy, I bring that back full circle for us, saying, do our mentors need to be gray-haired and old and using a cane? No, they may need to be that person coming home to clip at Christmas. I think we all need to look for our mentors there as well.
It's a great point, and a great reminder to check out. Really a very smooth segue too. We'll check out some of those Showbox podcasts at our New England Holstein site as well, and hear from some of those New Englanders that Tim's referenced, and that we've all enjoyed conversations around the Showbox with. Well, thanks to both of you for hanging out with me this afternoon on kind of a snowy-ish December afternoon. For our listeners, find these podcasts at New England Holsteins, nesholsteins.com, and anywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts, Spotify, Apple Play, YouTube, whatever your pleasure is there. And thanks again to our sponsors, Guardian Genetics and Zoetis, and best of luck for a fantastic set of events and lots of fun in Music City for you folks.
Thanks for having us, Bets.
Thanks for the invite, Bets.